This podcast is brought to you by Flipper, a marketplace to buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate. Plot your own path. Become a boss by buying a small online business at Flipper. Simply visit flipper.com/techtalks for a free consultation and 50% off fees. That's FLIPPA, flipper.com/techtalks. If you do visit, let me know how you get on. But now, let's get the show started.
Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore how technology can transform your business. But not with shiny gadgets, but with real-world solutions. And wash all that down with real-life examples. And that's just a few of the reasons why I'm excited to get John and Naveen onto the podcast today from a company called All Covered, which is an IT services division of Konica Minolta. And over the past few weeks, they've been busy getting virtual health clinics up and running and supporting school districts who are now expected to operate virtually. And they also experience massive learning curves in getting these essential organisations to prioritise things like security and avoiding data breaches when they were suddenly put at huge risk with everybody working from home. And after also hearing how COVID-19 had an irrevocable impact on the healthcare and education industries. So I invited Naveen and John onto the podcast to share first-hand accounts of how customers in both of these areas had to cram years of digital transformation work into a span of just a few short weeks, and also learn more about what kind of changes they're prepping for in the months to come. But enough from me. Let's get them both onto the podcast right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, for having me today. I'm Naveen Balakrishna Raja. I am the National Practice Director for Healthcare IT Services with All Covered. As the Healthcare Practice Director, I'm responsible for the strategy, solutions, and services we provide for healthcare customers in the US.
And we also have John on the line as well. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about you, John?
Thanks, Neil. I'm John Clemens. I'm the National Solution Architect for Education Services at All Covered, and I also lead their national education practice. So all the IT solutions and services we provide to our education customers run through my practice area.
And for everybody tuning in and hearing about you guys for the first time, I think it's important to point out that All Covered is a division of Konica Minolta. But can I ask you to just set the scene and offer an overview of the kind of problems that you're solving through technology?
In the recent years, technology continues to have a dramatic impact on the healthcare industry. In that vein, digital transformation is revolutionizing patient care in new and exciting ways. By digitalizing the system, health services can be provided at a lower cost and higher quality. All Covered's healthcare practice offers innovative end-to-end technology products and solutions to healthcare organizations to enable them in their digital transformation journey. So whether our customers are an acute care, ambulatory clinic, day surgery center, imaging center, extended long-term care facilities, our team of experts help them with implementing and maintaining their IT infrastructure. We have a 24/7 enterprise help desk. We also provide HIPAA-compliant cloud services from our state-of-the-art data centers in the US. And also, we have a cybersecurity solution, and we have a SOC operations center based from where we help the customers to keep their patient health information safe.
And John, where do you fit into this and the kind of problems that you're solving through technology as well?
Well, Neil, everyone loves technology when it works and hates it when it doesn't. In education, when it doesn't work, it equates to lost learning time. So All Covered's mission in schools is to ensure that IT is not a burden, that they can focus on their primary mission, which is teaching and learning with students. We look at everything we do in education with the philosophy that every dollar spent on technology should be tied to the enhancing and enabling the learning process. And that if the expense of technology solutions doesn't achieve that goal, we ask the question, should we be doing it? So by asking these questions, it takes us farther and deeper into IT, than traditional IT companies who are managing servers, firewall switches, and access points, which is services we provide for our customers, but we take our practice even deeper into education, all the way to the classroom, to implement end user technologies that will be used by the students in the education process. So we're helping schools implement and support, one-to-one device programs, which in this current environment has become a big importance. We're helping schools ensure their IT infrastructure can support their classroom technology plans, which we find in a lot of schools, IT and curriculum that don't always align when they should. And then we're helping schools implement interactive classroom AV technology, as well as augmented reality and virtual reality solutions, better engage students and enhance their learning experience. With the ultimate goal is we want any solution we provide and any support we deliver to schools to help support their academic goals.
And I'm glad you mentioned the current environment there, because we'll have people listening in 165 different countries. And I think we all as a global community have been sharing the same problems, and we've been locked down throughout the world. But obviously we're now all coming out of lockdown. But I'm curious, what impact have you seen COVID-19 having on multiple industries?
COVID-19 has transformed our world and healthcare system in a short period of time. COVID has also brought in many challenges to the providers and health systems. There has been dramatic decrease in office visits. Care managers are now forced to do administrative roles because of the decreasing staffing. And also, as health systems are deferring elective surgery and preventive visits, such as, annual physical and wellness visits, there is a lot of patient attribution to their organization, which in turn is impacting their reimbursements. In the US, there is value-based care reimbursement model where it's all outcome driven. And there is a lot of emphasis on wellness visits and caring for the high-risk patients. Because of the COVID, that has an impact in their reimbursement as well. So as a result of these impact, the healthcare organizations are now coming out of this lockdown, or looking for ways to increase their revenue, also trying to see how they can bring their reimbursements back, and also to see how the patients can be seen remotely via telehealth, etc.
And of course, many parents listening have found themselves playing the role of home tutor and thinking, how come my 8-year-old is better at maths than me, and things like that. But John, it's been a huge year for education, hasn't it, as well?
It has. There's been a higher demand on teachers and staff, asking them to do more with fewer resources. With the biggest challenge that schools are facing right now is, how do they implement distant learning effectively? Especially with those younger kids, where the parents have become the teacher, as much as the teacher wants to be able to provide that learning. When they're not physically in the room, it's hard to get an 8-year-old to sit on their computer and participate. Budgets are being slashed in schools, which is, an even bigger challenge, because a lot of schools are tied to tax revenue. If there's tax revenue shortfalls, schools' budgets get cut. And then there's the challenge that closing schools and kids being out of class, it has a ripple effect on the rest of the economy. Some parents are lucky enough to be able to work from home. They have older kids who are more self-sufficient. They can get by, but you really can't get the economy back up and going till the solution of getting students back in school is really resolved.
So do you guys have any stories around tech challenges of actually getting virtual health clinics up and running and supporting school districts who were suddenly expected to operate virtually? Because I get the impression there's going to be more than a few war stories out there, but is there any you could share?
Yeah, we had several good stories that we can say, especially, coming into COVID and on the onset of this, a lot of healthcare organizations were very little adoption of telehealth, right? This was due to the fact that there was no reimbursement for telehealth visits. So with COVID-19 and relaxation of HIPAA penalties and the Department of Health and Human Services also providing reimbursements, every healthcare organizations, doctors' offices started to quickly wanting to set up these virtual clinics. So, we were requested from our customers, for these entire implementation, which usually takes about 3 to 4 months, to be done within a week. And that too with certain integration with some of the leading EHR systems. So we had to, our team got in a quick implementation timeline, and they were working several hours into the weekends also, trying to implement telehealth solution, integrating with the EHR system so that basically they can send the providers, especially if they are over the age of 65, to remotely see patients. They didn't want them to be in front of the COVID patients. So that was one of the major, hurdle we had of implementing this telehealth solution within a short period of time. And also, healthcare organizations in the US revolve around the EHR, and there are so many manual, repetitive process that happens. And now with all of them trying to work remotely and with less staff members on the premise, this digitalizing this workflow was very essential too. So there were a lot of quicker solutions that we had to put in place so that those records are available to the healthcare workers and the patient records. So with the interoperability solutions had to be in place, and effective exchange of information between providers had to be set up. So there were a lot of challenges that we had to overcome.
And like I said a few moments ago, parents know all about the challenges of virtual schooling. But John, is there any stories you can share from the school's perspective?
Yeah. So, the majority of schools were vastly unprepared to teach remotely. Most teachers, when you think about it, they've spent their whole career standing in front of a group of children or high school students or even higher education, standing in front of those students teaching. They were all thrown into online learning, video conferencing tools, using online collaboration, to an extent that many of them have never used before. And most schools had not had a plan to roll that out, ahead of this pandemic. So school IT departments were, vastly underprepared to support them. So, and we saw that the IT industry, as much as, everyone wanted to help, everyone came in with a million solutions. And the general consensus from education leaders around the country was that schools should, first look inside their school and look at the tools they already have and they utilize, and better utilize those platforms. Because we see as many schools, and not just in the US, but globally, have adopted G Suite for Education as a platform, or Office 365 for Education as a platform. Both of these platforms have large suites of tools that schools can use to enable remote learning. But most schools weren't leveraging these tools heavily and didn't know how to effectively teach remotely with them. So one thing we saw and did early on was create some live online training services and training series targeted at our education customers to help the teachers use these tools that they already have, they already know, but leverage them effectively in a remote environment. We actually received quite an overwhelming demand for this type of service. We actually opted to not only invite our existing customers, but open it up to the education community at large, to participate. One other thing that really, as a story that sticks out is, some schools were at the very infancy of online learning and online curriculum. We did have one school for a district that we created a entire home learning hub website for them from conception to final delivery in a little under a week in early April to help comply with their state's mandate to provide some type of online environment to be able to communicate with teachers and students and even the community, prior to that implementation, the schools were resorting to printing out large packets of information and sending them home with kids and then collecting them up at the end of the week. And it was just a major, undertaking and huge waste of resources. So, we helped that school create that platform, which really was a springboard for growing their online learning presence. And it's, continuing to evolve and grow, every day with more enhancements and, bringing them more to an online community where they weren't to start with.
And I'm curious, what kind of learning curves did you encounter in getting essential organizations to prioritize security and start avoiding data breaches? Because so many were wide open to risk with everyone working from home, weren't they?
Yeah, especially healthcare in the US is regulated by HIPAA and ITech compliance. And so overall, every solution that they implement has to be HIPAA compliant. But healthcare is also one of the most targeted industry by the hackers due to the high value of electronic patient health information in the dark web. So we saw a very large spike in phishing emails during the onset of COVID. And also these were related to fake CDC emails, verification of personal data for an economic stimulus check, also airline carrier refunds, fake cures and vaccines. So the requirements started to really have all these organizations implement a good security, looking at their SIM solutions for log and event management and monitor those. We also had a lot of publications from FBI and InfoGuard team, which is from a private-public coordination, giving information to the healthcare organizations to secure their employees from these phishing attacks. So all this helped them and also made sure that the applications and the data are secure. People are, when they are accessing from remote locations, they have a secure platform for security with two-phase authentication. And mostly I would say that smaller ambulatory practices, extended care facilities had more challenges and hit hard than the hospitals, because the hospitals were having a large team of security professionals and they were able to quickly ramp up their security activities, unlike the smaller doctors' offices and the extended care facility, which got completely locked down during COVID.
And were school IT departments prepared for cybersecurity and data breaches? And is education a target?
Yeah, education is very much a target. And one of the reasons they're a big target is because a lot of schools don't think they're a target. Schools have spent years and billions of dollars protecting the physical building with locks, with smart access and security cameras and other physical security. But now with everything moving online, everything moving virtual, cybersecurity is becoming a bigger and bigger importance. Knowing who's supposed to be connected into a school from the outside used to actually be fairly simple. As many schools have moved to online products, there were generally very few people from the outside connecting in. It might be a small handful of administrators or the superintendent, but there weren't a huge number of people. And then the concept of securing devices, that's something that wasn't new for schools, especially schools who did a lot of take-home devices, because schools were required to secure those devices and filter those devices, wherever they were. But what we did see in this pandemic was a lot of schools were emptying carts they had in the school and devices that were never meant to be sent home, that weren't able to be managed remotely. So we've seen a very large adoption in mobile device management solutions and content management solutions for student devices, so that schools can have control of what their students and even their staff are doing when they're remote. And then school admin and teachers, are under increased pressure today, worried about, their family, their students, their jobs even, There's a concern by school administrators and IT professionals within schools that users may be letting their guard down. There's very much a concern about phishing emails, malware, and social engineering attacks. I think at least weekly I hear in the news about some school who was either scammed with a fake invoice or through a phishing email, or being held for ransom for ransomware. With everything going on, this has become sort of a perfect time for these nefarious actors. Schools are already operating in an abnormal environment, so something out of the ordinary, like a new invoice, may not seem out of the ordinary. Schools are signing new contracts for new services and solutions with various vendors they've never worked with before, for everything from technology to janitorial services, just to make sure they're ready for the fall. It could be very much easier for a fake invoice to be put into the stack of things that are new for the school to be dealing with. So this concern is, we've seen a bigger uptick in schools looking to implement security awareness training programs for their administration and staff. And then even in some cases, we've seen schools look at implementing these same security awareness training solutions for their students to extend, cybersecurity and security awareness to part of their curriculum, not just something for the operation of the school.
I've had countless emails from listeners over the last few weeks talking about their fears and concerns around job security, while also seeing their interest rates on their savings drop considerably. And as a result, many are beginning to look at how they can invest in their future in an uncertain time. Could digital assets be the answer? Now, you might remember that I spoke to Blake Hutchinson, CEO at Flipper, on episode 1194 about how to buy digital assets and websites. In a nutshell, Flipper is a marketplace that you can buy and sell websites, stores, and digital real estate that are just ready to go. So if you do have dreams of running your own successful online business, or perhaps you're looking to exit your existing online business, my friends at Flipper can help you buy and sell. So if you're interested and want to find out more, please visit flipper.com/techtalks. That's FLIPPA.com/techtalks for a free consultation and also 50% off all fees. But now, back to the interview. Felt to me that we'd also almost gone from talking about digital transformation, and every article that you picked up or read was always about digital transformation, but businesses were not doing too much about it. And we went from that to cramming years of digital transformation work into the span of just a few short weeks. But is that something that you saw too?
Yes, especially in healthcare, if you look at healthcare organizations here, they go to the healthcare facility, do their job, and they go back home. So healthcare is one of the verticals where there are more manual process outside the electronic health record system. To most part, for the patients, care is being provided in a much of a lively and a personal interaction with their care providers. This was a change for both the patients and the care providers. Patient wellness visits were scheduled as a telehealth session, and providers were required to use the system, understanding the challenges faced by the patients. And they have to even help them in some situation to resolve issues with the patients, helping the patients download the app or holding the device so that they can have a good session with the patients. Updating and implementing the policies and procedures for manual repetitive process. So they had to take off, how can we change these processes, and having those policies implemented, and also training the workforce around that. Establishing a remote access for the workforce, right, who never connected to the systems or working from home. That was a big change for several sections of the healthcare organization. And then establishing the digital collaborative tools for easy and secure communication within the team members and with the patients. And not only that, and making sure that this is HIPAA compliant. Even if they had certain systems, they never used it in the past because they didn't want to share any patient information or documents. And now with these collaborative tools becoming very essential, they want to make sure it's HIPAA compliant and set up correctly as well.
And was it exactly the same in education too, John?
For schools, for years they had been trying to, fulfill their vision of digital transformation with the idea of anytime, anywhere learning. To do this, it took planning, technology, and of course, money. So there wasn't a huge adoption of achieving that goal. Or if they were achieving it, it was hard to sustain. The new reality of the anytime, anywhere learning process, shifted funding priorities, with the addition of the influx of federal, state, and local funding. These plans for the anytime, anywhere learning are moving forward at an incredible speed in nearly every school we've been talking to. One thing I believe that the majority of schools had over nearly any other industry that helped them make this transition more quickly is that schools have been very early adopters of cloud services. Many schools we work with pride themselves on having very few, if no, servers on their campus. Almost every product and platform or tool that a school needs, there's someone out there offering that as a software as a service solution. So when everything was shutting down, businesses were sending their employees to work from home. One thing that schools were not scrambling to do that we saw was that they weren't running to set up VPNs to remote access back to the school because most of their stuff was already in the cloud. They weren't changing workflows on accessing documents or launching programs. They were very much just changing where they access their content from and then how do they communicate with each other. But the communication between the user and the content really didn't change that much. But unlike a business, many schools, didn't have a computer for every user. It's less common in a business. If you use a computer at work, you have a computer. There's not as much shared devices. In education, that wasn't always the case. So it became especially a problem in the elementary grades in this rush to the digital transformation of anytime, anywhere learning. The vast majority of schools were still trying to reach that foundational step of having a device for every student. And with everything that's happening, it's compounded the challenges to be able to get devices for all those students. And then when they get those devices for the students, schools then have to figure out, does that student even have internet access at home? And if they don't, then the school has to now look at solving that problem as well.
And I think over the last few months, many businesses realise that their old ways of working and doing things were just no longer going to cut it. And many pivoted, some successfully, some not so successfully. But can you tell me a little bit more about how the collision of the digital-first service provider mindset combined with a global hardware provider mindset was actually the catalyst for change that someone like a company like Konica Minolta actually needed?
Konica Minolta made the transition from an hardware-oriented model to a service model 10 years ago when we acquired All Covered to support our own digital transformation as well as that of our customers. At that time, no one was looking at this business domain for expansion of our traditional business, but we recognized that companies needed assistance taking steps to implement digital technology. We saw the possibilities and opportunities that pioneered this strategy in support of our corporate mission to increase the value of our customers through innovation. Also, the acquisition of All Covered allowed us to extend the reach of solutions and services we could offer. And as a result, customer can count on a single source for a broad range of products and services, ranging from industry-leading MFP products, which we are known for, comprehensive workflow solutions, to optimized print services and managed IT services, all while delivering an exceptional value and support. We have continued to expand our capabilities around digital transformation into adjacent markets and even been helping dealers and customers navigating their own journey and addressing the workplace of the future. More than 20 acquisitions since then have strengthened our capabilities in managed IT services, ECM, as well as expanding our geographic footprint. We have been investing in this for a long time, and we have earned a reputation for driving digital transformation ahead of all other OEMs in this space.
Now, it also feels like consumer behavior has changed forever. And I'm curious, what kinds of changes are you prepping for in the months to come?
So we anticipate that healthcare organizations to operate in a model where telehealth, remote patient monitoring is going to be an integral part of the care delivery. We anticipate that they want the patients to be in the hospital for a very less time and then send them to either to their home or to their, if they are in the post-acute care facilities, so that they can monitor them so that the infection rates can be minimized. Digital transformation and automation for increasing the efficiencies and reducing the cost will be the primary driving force for some of the purchases. Already we see this was top of the minds of all the CIOs within the healthcare beginning of this calendar year before we were hit with COVID. But now with COVID and the pandemic situation, this is going to be the topmost priority, wherein they want to see how digital transformation can help them. And also bringing automation and remote process into their own workflows.
And John, it was only a few years ago that many teachers and people in education were a little bit nervous around the impacts technology could have on the industry. But from what I've seen, it certainly seems that it's seen as a great tool to help teachers. But have you noticed any changes in behavior there as well?
Yeah, so schools are still really very much writing the manual of what things are going to look like moving forwards. Schools aren't sure what the fall's going to look like with school reopenings, and that's having a great impact on what they're spending their IT money on. I've heard many ideas from what the fall semester will look like from schools across the country. Every one of those ideas requires a slightly different technology plan. But however, one thing that I've seen almost universally among all the schools I've talked to is that they need to be agile in the age of uncertainty. None think that they're going to go back to the way things used to be, or at least not anytime soon. There is the joke that, with distant learning, snow days will be a thing of the past. Schools, when they close for things like that, they'll just switch to their distant learning plan. So schools have already been reducing their spend on desktop computers and paper books for years. But their mindset is today that everything must be portable. The hardware, the content, and how the content's delivered needs to be flexible so that they can quickly adapt to any unforeseen events that may happen in the upcoming school year.
And Konica Minolta and all covered teams have developed a reputation for helping companies condense digital transformation efforts that were supposed to take years into a matter of just weeks. But I've got to ask, just to finish the podcast today, do you both have any tips to share for business leaders listening on how to make that happen?
So healthcare providers are highly conscious about providing personal care to the patients. This is on top of their minds. So bringing solutions that can increase that patient experience, communication, providing tools to the care managers to identify the high-risk patients, and managing the messaging to the patients based on analytics they receive from their claims data, clinical data, patient-reported data is going to be vital. A lot of these patients are going to be, doing some of these sessions using telehealth or using devices like IoTs, and the data from that is going to be one of the driving force for the care. Also, bringing HIPAA compliant digital collaborative tools and automating their manual repetitive processes can reduce cost and bring efficiencies. With value-based care, this has been outcomes has been top of the minds, and so they need to have tools that they can provide to their providers so that they can engage, look at the analytics from all these sources and help the patients. Last but not the least, increasing the security and monitoring the logs and activity using an SIM solution, and understanding the existence of electronic patient health information within the organization with the extended reach now that the employees are working remotely will be very important.
And John, for there'll be a lot of people in education where just the mention of digital transformation efforts taking weeks instead of years will be incredibly appealing. But are there any tips that you can leave us with today?
Yeah, we saw that schools that invested in providing professional learning experiences for their faculty and staff, had an easier time navigating remote learning. The schools that kept or hired education technology coaches, within their staff, were also in better position to support their teachers during these challenging times. Each school or district has a unique set of curriculum and ed tech tools that they've adopted. It's almost impossible to find a third party to be able to support them all. And we've seen for years, schools have been, letting go the wrong people in their technology teams as they're trying to optimize costs. An ed tech coach or an education technology curriculum director, they provide a vital role in supporting these schools for instruction. Instead, schools should be looking at outsourcing, IT infrastructure support for the same reasons that many schools outsource, food services or busing or janitorial services. They're a necessary part of school operations, but they are not the primary mission of schools, which is education.
Well, a huge thank you to both of you for joining me on the podcast today. So many talking points. And for anyone listening that would like to find you online, or equally contact your team if they've got any questions or just want to carry on the conversation we started today, could you just point them in the best direction of doing that?
Yeah, you can visit us on the web at allcovered.com/healthcare and by email to healthcareteam@allcovered.com.
Excellent. And same URL for you as well, is it, John, or just education?
For education, it is allcovered.com/education, or you can reach us at education@allcovered.com.
Excellent. Well, I love the work that you're doing here and how you're using technology. I always say technology works best when it brings people together. And you've given two fantastic examples here of how you're transforming education and healthcare. So I'd love to stay in touch with you. Maybe we can do this again later on in the year and learn more from these stories. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to share them with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Wow, where do I begin here? I think there were so many big talking points, but if I just drift from today's conversation for a moment, I love how Konica Minolta is an example of a global enterprise nearly a century old that has been able to evolve its business to stay competitive in today's ever-changing landscape by playing to its strengths in everything from cameras to copiers to its own digital transformation that allowed it to become a major player in IT and IoT services. But it's important to highlight that the company wasn't able to change overnight. They had to be an inflection point. And going against the advice of leading global business consultancy, Konica Minolta's North American CEO just made that decision to acquire All Covered, which is an IT services startup, because he simply saw the need, both among his customers and internally, for trusted IT services and support with true digital transformation consultants. How forward-thinking is that? So now, here we are in 2020, Konica Minolta with All Covered is one of the few global enterprises that has changed its business model from hardware maker to service hardware hybrid without changing the fabric of its values. And for me, that is an inspirational story on its own, because it shows firsthand how to evolve, how to adapt to a digital world the right way by playing to its strengths and evolving, but without losing its identity. But over to you. Please let me know your thoughts about today's conversation by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or you can get me on Instagram at Neil C. Hughes and LinkedIn, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. So keep those messages coming in. Lots to think about, and I'm interested in what you take away from it. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.